All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a term that honestly trips up a ton of Next.js developers, dynamic functions. You hear this phrase thrown around everywhere, but really understanding what it is, well, that's the secret to getting incredible performance out of your apps. So you've definitely seen this floating around, right? On social media, in blog posts, maybe your tech lead mentioned it. But here's the crazy part, and this is the first big clue. Go ahead, search the official Next.js docs for dynamic functions. You know what you'll find? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what on earth is everyone talking about? Well, the answer is actually way more interesting than you'd think. Okay, and this right here, this is the key to the whole puzzle. Dynamic functions aren't some feature you import or a tool you pick up. Think of it more like a side effect. It's a consequence, something that happens to your app because of other code you wrote. So if it's the effect, what's the cause? That's what we're about to unpack. So, first things first, let's just bust this myth wide open. The term dynamic functions is basically community slang. It's a nickname that caught on because it's a really convenient way to describe a very real thing that happens in Next.js, even if it's not, an official documented feature. What people really mean when they say this is they're talking about a cause and effect relationship. You write some code, maybe you use a specific API or set a certain config, and that code acts like a trigger. It flips a switch inside Next.js, forcing it to change how it builds a page. It goes from its default static mode to a fully dynamic on-demand mode. Okay, so to really get why this is such a big deal, you have to back up a bit. We need to talk about the two fundamental ways Next.js builds a web page. Honestly, this static versus dynamic trade-off, it's like the central conflict, the main plot of the entire Next.js story. By default, Next.js is absolutely obsessed with speed. Its whole philosophy is static first. It has this thing called automatic static optimization, and its one and only job is to pre-build as much of your website as it possibly can into plain old HTML files when you deploy. Why? Because you can then throw those files on a CDN all around the world, and for your users, that page load is going to feel instantaneous. So here's the trade-off, plain and simple. You've got two paths. Static rendering gives you that lightning-fast, super cheap performance. It's perfect for things like your company's homepage or a blog post. But the second you need something that's unique to the user, like their profile dashboard or a live shopping cart, you have to flip the switch to dynamic. Now that page is going to be a little slower to load because it's built on demand, but the data will be 100% fresh every single time. Okay, so when one of your pages gets forced into this dynamic mode, it doesn't just affect that one page. It creates a ripple effect that spreads across the entire Next.js caching system. And we're not talking about just one simple cache. No, this is a really clever, multi-layered system designed to squeeze out every last drop of performance. Let's break down what those layers actually are. The easiest way to think about it is like a series of waterfalls, or layers. Next.js always tries to grab what it needs from the fastest, closest cache first. Only if it finds nothing there does it move down to the next, slightly slower layer. And trust me, understanding these 4 layers is the absolute key to figuring out why your app might be slow. Okay, layer 1, request memoization. This is the simplest one. It's an in-memory cache that only lasts for a single request. All it does is prevent you from asking for the exact same data twice while rendering one page. If your header and your sidebar both need the user's name, Next.js is smart enough to fetch it once and just share the result. Super efficient. Now what about when a different user comes along a second later? That's where layer 2, the data cache, kicks in. And this one is a real game changer. It's a persistent cache that lives on the server, and it saves the results of your data fetches. So if you fetch a list of products, the next person who visits the site gets that data instantly from the cache without ever bothering your database. Huge performance win. All right, now we get to the big one. Layer 3, the full route cache. This is the cache that is most directly impacted by those so-called dynamic functions. See, this cache doesn't just store little bits of data. It stores the whole shebang, the fully rendered HTML and the React server component payload for an entire page. For static pages, this is why they're so fast. The finished page is just sitting there, waiting. But when a route goes dynamic, poof, this cache is completely ignored. And last but not least, we have layer 4, the router cache. This one lives entirely in the user's browser. As you click around a Next.js app, it's cleverly prefetching the pages you might go to next and storing them right there in memory. That's the magic behind why navigating between pages or hitting the back button feels so incredibly snappy and seamless. Okay, so now we get it. When a route becomes dynamic, the big consequence is that it skips over that super important full route cache. But the million-dollar question is, what actually causes this? What are the specific lines of code that act as the trigger and force Next.js to abandon its static default? Well, the first group of triggers are what we can call inherent dynamic APIs. These are functions that, just by their very nature, need to know something about the specific user who is visiting the site right now. Think about it. Things like headers or cookies. You can't know a user's cookie at build time, right? You can only know it when they actually make a request. So if your page uses any of these, Next.js has no choice but to build it on the fly. The second category is a lot more direct. This is where you, the developer, literally tell Next.js what to do. You can just export a simple configuration from your page file like dynamic equals force dynamic that basically says, hey, Next.js, I don't care what you think. This page must always be rendered fresh for every single visit. It's you taking manual control. And when you lay it all out like this, the pattern just jumps right out at you. Just look down that bypasses cache column. See a theme? Every single one of these triggers, every single one, forces a bypass of the full root cache. That right there is the trade-off we've been talking about, laid bare. All right, so we've diagnosed the problem, we understand the cause and the effect, so now for the important part. What do we do about it? How do we take this knowledge and use it to build apps that are both incredibly fast and fully dynamic where they need to be? Well, a big part of it is just choosing the right tool for the right job. If you're building out a public API endpoint, something another service is going to call, route handlers are your best bet. They give you total control. But for stuff inside your app, like handling a form submission, server actions are fantastic because they're simpler and handle a lot of the cache updating logic for you automatically. So let's wrap up with the key takeaways, the best practices. First, think hybrid. Don't make your whole app dynamic or your whole app static. The sweet spot is a static page shell with dynamic content streamed in. Second, be surgical. Instead of using the force dynamic sledgehammer that makes the whole page dynamic, try using the cache no-store scalpel on just one specific data fetch. It's all about being precise to get the best of both worlds. So in the end, it really comes down to this. Mastering performance in Next.js isn't about avoiding dynamic rendering. Not at all. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that every time your code reads a cookie or uses a search param, you are consciously making a choice. You're trading a little bit of that raw static speed for essential dynamic power. And knowing exactly when and why you're making that trade, that's what's going to make you a truly great Next.js developer.